What I want to do is give you some examples of this in practice that I've seen in not only clients of mine, but just in looking at the industry. And I think it's pretty fascinating when we start looking at like various categories and what goes on as far as what kind of strategy they ought to be adopting. And I want to use 4 different examples to illustrate this. One is in this category called wearables. Now, a year ago at the Consumer Electronics Show, Intel sponsored a contest. It was called Make It Wearable. And the head of Intel, he got up on the stage and said, I am going to offer, we Intel, are going to offer $500,000 to the company that creates the most innovative and practical, greatest, unique example of a wearable technology. And so there were companies throughout the year that were creating this. Ultimately, it got narrowed down to 50 companies. I was lucky enough to be a mentor for 3 of these companies, and one of those made it to the top 10. But Intel ultimately awarded a grand prize to, incidentally, this company that created a flying camera. So it was a wearable camera. If you go to Intel, Make It Wearable, you'll see this thing called Nixie. And it's a camera that straps around your wrist, and it's designed for rock climbers. So if they want to get a selfie of them climbing a rock, guess what? You got to hold with both sides of the mountain somehow. So you throw this camera up in the sky, it films you, and it comes back to you and put back on your wrist. So that's an example of what we would call early market, by the way.
If you fall off the mountain, does it film you on the way down?
Absolutely. You can make it do that, seriously. So it has 2 options. One is called hover, where it always is looking at you and follows you. There's another option called the boomerang option, where you throw it out and it comes back. So yes, if you fall off the mountain, and if you've chosen the hover option, it'll fall right there with you. But wearables is an interesting example of early market. There's another category that is starting to cross the chasm very nichely. How's that for a word? It's called 4K TV, 4K video, 4K televisions. So if you go into Costco, you know how you see these huge rows of TVs, and half of them might be about $2,000 to $2,500 each. Those are 4K. And then there's a whole other set of TVs that run anywhere from $400 to $1,000. Those are the standard HD TVs as we've known. But 4K actually has 4 times the resolution of a high-definition TV. The challenge is we don't have a whole lot of content to take advantage of that resolution. But Samsung is starting to do some really interesting things with 4K TV to take it across the chasm. When it comes to the Tornado, there is a category called cloud business applications. And it was probably started by Mark Benioff and Salesforce. And Salesforce went through this early market, Bowling Alley Tornado, and then now, as far as their cloud CRM, it's on Main Street. It's like no risk, and everybody can use it. But there's a company up in Pleasanton called Workday. And Workday has specialized in human resource applications initially. And they're also building a set of financial applications. Workday this year just posted revenues of over $700 million, up 68% from a year earlier. Good side of a tornado is revenue growth greater than 50%. So we're going to talk about Workday for a little bit. And then finally, when it comes to Main Street, what we said earlier with smartphones. Now the focus is on end users, and there's not a lot of disruptiveness anymore. But for each one of these different categories, whether it's wearables, whether it's 4K TV, whether it is cloud-based human resource systems, or whether it's smartphones, totally different type of strategy that you need to use for each one of these categories. Now, I'll just talk about each of those in a little more detail. If we think about wearables, one of the companies that existed was a company called ProGlove. that exhibited at the Intel Wearables Conference. In fact, they held the finals like the 1st of November, and each of these companies actually demonstrated what they've created. There's a company based in Germany called ProGlove, and they have all these sensors inside of an industrial glove that workers on the assembly line would wear. And what they're doing, when we talk about target customer is a visionary line of business or functional executive, they found a way that they can reduce the defects in the assembly line that workers use. So they have all these sensors in each finger, the hand, and up through the wrist. And they can sense how you're mounting something onto an automobile in an assembly line. So how you put a particular fender against this. And they've been able to tell that if you do it a certain way, it's going to reduce the number of defects. So what they're doing, they're working with a major car company in Germany. So it's either BMW or Mercedes, who's working with this company to figure out how to reduce their costs, reduce any kind of quality defects that they might have in the assembly line. So their target customer, it's a visionary line of business, probably a manufacturing manager at one of these major car companies who sees this as a way to get dramatic competitive advantage by being able to have as low a defects as possible. The whole product, it's application focused, so it's focused on solving a business problem, but it's differentiated. It means for every customer I sell to, that my whole product's going to look different. So they might be working with a car company on the assembly line for a whole product. They might also be working with a large earth-moving machine manufacturer to work with them in how operators actually operate the equipment and sense the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. So every one of these is different. They're partners, if they use any at all, it's going to be like outside consultants that will help them in figuring out what is this crazy solution we're trying to do. As far as their channel strategy, we're not going to allow a third party to try to sell this for us. So we're going to do it direct. We're working directly with our customers. The pricing, no time to discount here. It's a value-based price, so we should actually think of a pretty hefty premium price based on the potential gain that somebody's going to receive by doing this. Competition, you're actually competing against other ways of getting competitive advantage. So if it's Mercedes or BMW, it doesn't get competitive advantage by making their manufacturing more efficient. They might get a competitive advantage in a totally different way. So it's another category. Your positioning here, make no apologies that you create great technology and that's what we're selling. This is a completely new way of workers working with their on the manufacturing line. So it's technology-based leadership. Next target is just find another visionary in another industry and go there. But that's early market. That's an example of what we do in the early market. As Michael mentioned, we have basically 4 different types of strategy, though. Same 9 points executed 4 completely separate ways. The next example is in 4K TV. And if we think about, if you're Samsung or Panasonic, and you're manufacturing these 4K TVs, it costs upwards of $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000, depending on the size of them. Yeah, you can put them in Costco and hope some technology enthusiasts are going to buy it, which they do. There's some, and I call it pretty well-to-do technology enthusiasts. But most people, even they're not going to get 4K because we don't have programming that does 4K right now. You go to DirecTV, do you do 4K? Well, no, but it's coming. Are movies created in 4K? Maybe down the road, but it's down the road. So, if you're an executive at Panasonic or Sony, and Panasonic or Samsung, think about who you might sell to. You want to increase demand. You want to find demand for these 4K TVs. And one thing you might want to do, and I'm going to back up for a second. When HD TVs first came out, what was the first segment that they went after? Any of you have any idea? What were some of the first segments of the HD TVs? What's that?
Sports bars?
Sports bars, exactly. So I can remember, I don't frequent sports bars more than maybe once a week. But we remember there was a time where sports bars had the old CRT TVs, and they kept trying to get them bigger and bigger. In fact, the max was like 36-inch, Video TVs. And then it was like over a year's time. All of a sudden, one sports bar had a flat screen TV, and then, we can get this in high definition, and we can see the details of a World Series, a football game, Super Bowl. And before you know it, sports bars everywhere are moving from the old way to the new way. Second example of moving from the old traditional to HD is companies that had an exhibit in a conference show. So in their booth, as opposed to having the old little flat computer screens, now they've got this large, beautiful flat screen display to put in their trade show booth. We also saw corporate headquarters that would have this beautiful, large screen, high definition display that might be running a presentation of one sort or another. So initially we saw the businesses adopt it. And oftentimes, especially with consumer type electronics, it's adopted in business first, and then as the price gets down, then we'll see the consumers start adopting. Well, what's going on now? So now HD TVs are on Main Street. They're prolific. And now we have this thing called 4K, which is literally 4 times the resolution. And Samsung looked and said, wow, who would be interested in this? What if I were a retailer of a really exclusive, high-fashion store? And I could use digital signage to show some of the latest dresses that are being worn. And you can literally get right up to the screen and you do not see pixels. It looks like a pure photograph with no pixels. It's that clear. So you can see all the nuances of this expensive dress. And so they're now looking at taking these into retail stores, high-end retail stores, and using them as a display type advertising. So one example of crossing the chasm with 4K television. When it comes to the bowling alley, again, same 9-point strategy, but it changes. Now, back here, so Samsung is targeting the merchandising manager of these stores to fix a broken business process, that process being the ability to just effectively catch the customer's eye and get them to stop long enough to go check out this specific dress. They built a whole product that's standardized for the fashion industry. Now, if they were to go somewhere else, they would have to build a different whole product because the content would be different. And they might recruit some partners to help build this whole product. They sell it direct. Ultimately, they'd probably use an indirect route as they get more and more markets to go after. But the pricing, it's a value-based pricing based on solving this problem. Their competition, it will depend on other ways of solving this problem. So in the case of 4Ks, one company may be going after fashion, another one may be going after corporate trade show booths. So it's the application of the technology. The positioning is they want to claim segment leadership. If you're in the fashion industry, we are the market leader here. And then finally, next target, go to the next adjacent segment. Now, when it comes to the tornado strategy, think of if you're an executive at this company called Workday. How many of you have heard of Workday? They're up in Pleasanton. And the founder of it is Dave Duffield. Dave Duffield founded PeopleSoft back 15, 20 years ago. And PeopleSoft grew in the client-server HR systems. And eventually, what PeopleSoft ended up getting bought by Oracle, and so it's not part of Oracle, but a very mature type product. Dave said, gee, we could take these HR systems and put them in the cloud. And our first target customer is going to be all the people that bought PeopleSoft initially. But now they're beyond replacing PeopleSoft installations and replacing Oracle installations and replacing SAP installations. Now they're just going after anybody that wants to switch to a new cloud-based HR system. So their target customer is this technical buyer. So somebody has been given the job at a company, go replace our HR system. Just come up with something new. Compelling reason to buy, we just want to throw out this old crap we've been using, this old client service stuff, and we want to move it to the cloud. That's easy as that. It's just, we want to throw out the old stuff. Incidentally, in a tornado market, your job as a vendor is not to create demand. If we think about in the early market, bowling alley or Main Street, our job is to create demand. What's our job in the tornado? It's not to create demand, it's to increase adoption and fulfill demand. Demand is already out there. So our job is just to fulfill demand. And this becomes this huge game of market share. And tornado is one phase where we actually tell our clients, you might want to think about a price reduction strategy as each price reduction will bring in new customers. So it becomes a very competitive battle because the first customer you get in a tornado, they'll be your customer for life, and they can sell more and more things. So if Workday can get a new customer using the HR, they come around that later and sell their financial applications or their business intelligence applications, or should they decide to get into CRM or something like that. So it's a huge battle. So if we think about Workday, a technical buyer, just get into the new thing. The whole product, it's very product focused, and when we say standardized, it means it's a one size fits all. Because our job is to fulfill demand, we don't have time to do all these customized versions for one company or even for one sector and another sector. It's just get our product done and get it out the door and serve as many as we can. Partners and allies, where we might have had a lot of partners earlier on, now we want to rationalize these and get down to the best few. So if we're working with a consulting organization, instead of working with 25 consulting organizations, we might pick the top two or three that help implement our product. Channel strategy, you want to start driving to channels that might expand your market and increase adoption that way. The pricing, it's a competition base. So now, if you're the market leader, you set the standard price, and others will price either more than less than you. But it's a competition-based pricing strategy. And it's based now on eliminating this pain of being on an old infrastructure. Competition is this huge battle now of one company versus another company. So you're competing against other companies that offer a similar thing. And again, it's a huge market share war to see who can become the market leader here. The positioning is based on your level in that hierarchy. If you're what we call the gorilla, you act like a gorilla, you beat your chest. We're the biggest, we're the best. And that's exactly what Workday is doing in this category of HR. They're the number one in this category. Others may say, well, we're just as good as them, but we're a whole lot cheaper. And that's fine. That's what we call a monkey strategy. And then there's even others who say, well, we're maybe not the biggest, but for a particular industry, we are the best. And that's what we call a change strategy. And then finally, next target, you might want to think about going on to new geographies, for example. Let's expand to China. Let's expand to Asia Pacific area or to Europe. So totally different strategies we get into the tornado market. And then finally, when we talk about Main Street, and this is one I just find interesting, because Main Street, you can either continue to renew yourself or you end up eventually, as Michael said, becoming Kodak. And so Main Street is all about renewing yourself. And if we think about smartphones, target customer now, it's end users. I mean, each of you make your own decision. You know, maybe unless you work for a big company that purchases, but even in a large company that might purchase them for their employees, they still give you the option to say, okay, you can have the Apple 6 or the Apple 6 Plus, or you can have the Android or the Note or whatever you want. So, but the power really gets into end users, and now compelling reasons to buy. It's better values. There's no risk. So this really becomes the essence of consumer marketing when we get up to Main Street. Our whole product, it's very product focused. I mean, the whole product is now a given. What we start doing on Main Street is actually finding out ways of differentiating our whole product. So we all have smartphones. How many of you have an Android smartphone? Okay. How many of you have an iPhone? Okay. And of that, how many of you have the iPhone 6? Okay. And how many of you have the iPhone 6 Plus? Okay. Okay. So the 6 Plus is a little larger. Any of you with Android have a Samsung? Any of you have a Samsung Galaxy Note? Couple, thank you. I'm not the only nerd here. But this thing here has a stylus, which incidentally, I lost it the other day. So, maybe a whole product issue with Samsung. But this one here, I can literally write on this phone just the way Michael was as he was writing on his tablet. But the interesting thing about Main Street is now we start seeing things come in all shapes and sizes. But the inside, they're pretty much all the same. One might have a little more powerful chip. One might do something a little better, but it becomes more of a cosmetic thing. I want a large screen. No, I want one that's really small that I can keep in my pocket and it doesn't, make weird marks on my pants or what have you. So if we think about Main Street, it's end users who want to get better values. It's very much product focused. Partners and allies, minimally required. Who do we have on Main Street with smartphones? Well, we have our service provider, and we have the company that actually makes the smartphone. And then we have these third parties that build things like cases and earphones and those kind of things. Channel strategy, we want to go into channels that are lower in cost but have very kind of high touch. Hence, we see a lot of the retail stores where, yes, they will wait on you and help you in making your decision. Pricing, this is competition-based, but it's based on the potential gain motivator. Interestingly, when you go and buy an iPhone, you're not going to get a discount at all. And if you lose your iPhone, if you're covered by insurance, you still have to pay like $160 deductible. Apple, incidentally, does not have the greatest revenue in smartphones, but they have by far the greatest amount of profit. They're hugely profitable in that business. Versus, they make more profit than all the other Android devices combined. Competition is just, I prefer this product over this product. I prefer an iPhone, I prefer an Android. I prefer a large iPhone, I prefer a smaller iPhone. I prefer a Samsung, or I prefer the big screen Note that can take notes. The positioning, all you're talking about is a better experience for end users. If you look at the ads that we see for all the phones on TV, it's all about the consumer and all about them having fun and having a great experience with their phone. Next target is just find another micro segment to go after that they might build some unique feature that addresses this. So what we end up having is 4 different templates for how we go to market. One template here, this is really appropriate if you're ProGlove trying to sell a sensor-driven glove to an automotive manufacturing company in Germany. The bowling alley, this approach could make sense if you're Samsung and you're specifically targeting the fashion industry and specifically high-end retailers. The tornado, this can make sense when your job is not to create demand, your job is to fulfill demand. And in this tornado, Workday is doing that right now, just growing, as I mentioned, 68% over just a year earlier. Gosh, why didn't I buy stock in them about 6 years ago? Anyway. And then finally, Main Street, we're selling to end users, and that's an example of the phone industry. When we think about our solution or our whole product, it evolves over time. In the early market, a lot of what you do, this yellow here just represents technology. So we have wearables technology, and it starts with this chip that Intel sells called the Edison. And the reason Intel started this contest a year ago is they wanted to get all kinds of ideas going in the market of how this Edison chip could be used. It's designed specifically for wearables. So Intel relies on the solution providers to eventually come up with innovative ways of doing this. But ProGlove created this industrial glove, but the way they do it for this automotive company in BMW, in Germany, whether it's BMW or Mercedes, it's going to be a totally different solution when they take it into some other industrial type of company. A plug and play, if we think about Samsung and their 4K TVs, so they now have a product here in the center. It's not just technology, but it's actually a product, like a 4K TV. But the solution that they deliver is going to be different in the fashion industry than it will be in a sports bar, or than it would be in a corporate lobby, or than what it would be in a trade show booth. Fully integrated, basically what we now have, instead of a different solution for different segments, we basically now have a one-size-fits-all. And we do that so we can fulfill demand. And then finally, mass customized. Our product is basically the same on the inside, but these little things on the outside, they're what we call plus ones. So let's deliver it in a large size. Let's deliver it in a small size. Let's deliver it with a little pen capability, and so forth. So we have lots of different features and functions that appeal to what we call micro segments. So this whole product solution, wherever you're playing in the life cycle, it's mandatory that you have a complete solution, whether it's early market, bowling alley, tornado, or Main Street. Think of a whole product as being, it's your core product here in the middle, complementary products and complementary services. And this is an example, especially if you think about the bowling alley, where it's pretty complex and every whole product is maybe different for every different application of the technology. But what you want to do is make sure you have thought of whatever it takes to fulfill my customers' compelling reason to buy. So whether you're at any of these phases, you still have to deliver a whole product. By the way, Michael talked about me being kind of a geek, which is true, I guess. It's true. Yes, I had the Rio Riot. When it first came out, it had 40 gig of disk, and I could burn all my CDs and then do a transfer of these CDs onto this thing called a Rio Riot. I could carry that on a plane, and I used to carry just stacks of CDs because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to listen to. I just burned them all and put them on this Rio Riot. But it was a pain to do. But what ended up happening, first one in the market is not always the most successful. First one in the market with a whole product is generally guaranteed to be successful. And who was the first one in the market with a whole product for music? As we talked about, it was Apple. It not only had a really cool player with the iPod, but they also set up the infrastructure with iTunes where you could go and pay 99 cents and get any song you wanted to download it into your system. So they're first in the market with a whole product with the iPod. They were the first to the market with the whole product for the iPhone, for a smartphone. They really made the smartphone very safe buy. And then later, first to market with the whole product for the iPad. And so Apple has actually done 3 radically new whole products over the course of a decade, something we haven't seen any other company do, which is why, incidentally, their stock is worth more than any other company in the world right now. So they have done an extremely good job of that. I want to talk a little bit about, I'm just curious, how many of you are responsible for the direction of a product in your company? Any of you have product management type responsibility? Good. Okay, about 7 or 8 of you. One of the questions that always comes up as a product manager is how do I keep the customer satisfied? You know, what features do I need to add into my product or put into my product in order for this thing to be successful? And it's always a huge debate over that you have with your product teams, with management and everything about, well, we should do this, we should maybe not do this. I want to give you just a little guidelines, and then we're going to talk about an example of this from the phone industry. But if we think about 2 dimensions we want to look at, one is how do we deliver customer satisfaction? The other is how do we deliver that customer satisfaction over time? So there's things we can do to get really happy customers. In the early market, just get your product done. Just get it built. And if you let the world know that you've created this thing, visionaries will actually seek you out and say, I'd like to try this thing. Because they're looking for getting competitive advantage. If you get your initial product out, even though it's not complete, it's just good enough to help out this visionary in accomplishing their goals. That's what you want to do in the early market. In the bowling alley, you want to work on the enablers, not the delighters. Notice the delighters are for Main Street. So delighters are what we do with smartphones. But with 4K TVs, we want to work on the enablers, just the things that make it able to work, in Samsung's case, at high-end retail stores for display advertising. Once you get the enablers for high-end retail stores, then work on the enablers for trade show booths, for example, and so forth. Eventually, though, if this product starts moving into what we call the tornado, the way you get satisfaction is not by getting the enablers done, because once the enablers are done, you know, all those customers, all they're going to want is the delighters. The way you increase this as the market goes into the bowling alley, into the tornado, is by working on price performance. So how can we help customers get more for their money, and how can we make our product just perform very well so that we don't have to spend our time solving problems with it. Instead, we can be proactively taking it into the market. There comes a point, though, where there's no more price performance to be delivered. You know, we've gotten it so efficient, and now we can start working on the delighters. So this is a Main Street market where we go to our customer base and say, what can we do for you? So we start working on the delighters. And I want to give you an example of this from the phone industry, but before I do, I just want to mention one of the pitfalls that we see happening is, especially in the bowling alley, you'll get this whole product completed, and you go to your customers. So you go to the high-end fashion stores and say, what else could we do to make you happy? And they're going to have a whole list of things you can do, but what are they going to be telling you? You've already done the enablers. You've already done the enablers, so if you go back to those customers, they're going to tell you the delighters. And the temptation will be, well, let's take it from here to here. Let's make them just absolutely love us. Instead, what you want to do in the bowling alley is find another segment to go after, build the enablers for them, and then another segment to go after, build the enablers for them. So be careful about asking for customer feedback in the bowling alley. As long as the feedback is about solving the basic problem, that's fine. But if it's anything beyond that, save those for Main Street.